a safe space for St. Louis to learn about soccer. This is Soccer 101 with Michelle Smallman and Moon Valjean.
Welcome into Soccer 101. This is the safe space for St. Louis to learn about soccer. I'm Michelle Smallman, and Moon Valjean is here as well. Moon, what's going on, buddy? How you doing?
Holy smokes, I'm doing well. This World Cup has been so exciting. And I'll tell you what, not only as a spectator and a fan of soccer, have I just been loving every single day, watching these matches, watching the highlights of the ones that I missed. But even today, while we were doing the Riz show, the Croatia-Japan match was on. This is the round of 16. I have a huge soft spot for the Japanese team because a number of years ago, I was there, I believe the very, very first time they ever made round of 16. And it was in the middle of the night. 100,000 people and myself flooded out into the streets after they won and advanced into Shibuya Station. There were people. I mean, it was the most fun celebration that I have ever been a part of in anything globally ever, especially around soccer. And 100,000 of us were in Shibuya Station, this huge, famous intersection, and we were crowd surfing and all this kind of stuff. So I'm like, I'm so rooting for Japan now that the U.S. is out. But interestingly enough, while we were doing the Riz show, and this was on behind me, Riz, right when we go to commercial break, screams, I can't do this. This is so distracting, because I can't take my eyes off of this game. I can't stop watching this game. And he was legitimately yelling at the TV because of how exciting a game that he has no skin in was and how distracting it was during our show. So, and I mean this wholeheartedly, everyone I know that isn't necessarily a soccer fan is starting to get into it because they're seeing it's not about the high scoring. I don't need an 8-8 game or whatever it is. Everyone is seeing the actual excitement in this sport. And are you feeling that too?
I'm feeling it as well. Obviously, with the USA playing, I think a lot of people got on board just because of national pride. But I think now you're invested. Now you've seen some of these teams. The games are happening at different parts of the day. So I feel like people are checking in at different times and getting invested in different teams. And it feels, Moon, like there's more interest in soccer in America now than ever. And I know we say that all the time. We always say, oh, it's a growing sport. Eventually, one day it's going to be a top 3 sport in America. But it truly does feel like there is more interest now in this team and this sport and this World Cup than we've ever seen before.
Yeah, I think what you said is true. Every year that goes by, we do say that, hey, soccer is gaining momentum in the U.S. And I don't think that that's ever been false. Not a single year. I mean, look at the MLS. It's grown from, a dozen teams to a few dozen teams in just a matter of a couple decades. So I think that's true. I think the difference now is we are really seeing the results. We're feeling the results. The Nielsen ratings for these games, these matches is making the news among all the NFL stuff on a Monday night or a Sunday night. You'll see an article about U.S. breaks records for this market and this market and this market watching World Cup matches, and we're not even talking about necessarily U.S. matches. Riz and the Riz show, we have an entire like a show thread on our texts, and the entire weekend it was about soccer for the first time ever. My dreams are coming true, Michelle. My dreams are coming true.
You know what's funny about that, Moon? My family group chat, all about soccer too. So even my mom, who's not even really a sports person or a soccer person, has been very invested. But it's funny what you mentioned about the ratings, because I saw something come across that really piqued my interest. And I know you were mentioning ratings for every match, but USA Netherlands specifically, which happened on Saturday, I saw this tweet, Moon. That game drew 12.96 million viewers on Fox. It was up 163% from the round of 16 back in 2018. And what I thought was even more intriguing is the top 5 markets that were checking in for that game: Cincinnati number 1, St. Louis number 2, Washington, D.C. 3, Kansas City 4, Austin 5. So I thought that was really interesting. Not only that it had grown that much, but that St. Louis was number 2. And I guess Washington, D.C. is a bigger market. Austin is certainly a growing population. But I love that Kansas City, St. Louis, Cincinnati, these middle-sized markets throughout America are really investing. That is, to me, a big indicator of the growth of soccer in America. That's not L.A., that it's not Dallas, it's not New York City, it's not Miami. It's Cincinnati, St. Louis, Kansas City.
Yeah, that's an enormous accomplishment, especially for our town. Like that's so cool. We were number 2. And think about this too. These are once every 4 years matches. So we're not talking about having every household with the television on, or each individual family or soccer fan watching a TV. A lot of these, if you saw Amsterdam Tavern's picture from their watch party in the street, there was 1,500, 2,000 people out in the street. So that's 2,000 people on one screen, and we still made number 2. You know
That's
what I mean?
right. Good point.
That's enormous. Like think about the actual number of people that have their eyes on these matches. They did watch parties down at City Park. I mean, it's a watch party type of event, and the fact that we were number 2, be proud, St. Louis, be proud.
It does have that Super Bowl feel where you want to watch it in a big group setting with other people. I mean, it's bigger than the Super Bowl. It's the World Cup, but I know a lot of people like to consume soccer, especially in America. You know, if you're watching Premier League or whatever, it's on a Saturday morning. You like to make your coffee. You like to kind of settle in at home and watch it. But this felt like such a big event, and everybody wanted to be out doing things for it, which, you know, has been there in the past, but I think it's so much bigger than we've ever seen. And, you know, let's get into the game a little bit, Moon, because unfortunately the US is out. We were, and our apologies that we didn't have a podcast last week, but we wanted to wait until after the match on Saturday. And even though the USA, they were undefeated from Group B, they went into the knockout round versus the Netherlands. They had some chances at some points, Moon, but they did fall 3-1. And I want to get your temperature check after the USA got knocked out. How are you feeling about this team, about this program, about the game?
Well, as a fan and as a studier, I will say what most people are saying. If you had asked me, within an hour or two after that game, I would have been really frustrated and had some intensity that I'm going to settle down right now. Just because, you know, it's a lot of standing up and yelling at the screen, and I was standing far too close to the screen for my health. And I'll say this. It's a young team, and I know everybody's been saying that because it is our second youngest team, I think, ever in the World Cup. But it's a young team full of energy, and kudos to the Netherlands. 5 minutes in, I yelled, okay, I see what they're doing here. They know that we have a young, energetic team, and they're going to sit back and they're going to let us be energetic, and they're going to play a strategic game because we didn't have a lot of strategy going on. Get it to Pulisic or get it to the wings, or just, you know, energetically cross some balls in. That's not a strategy. Those are plans, and, you know, those are plays. And the Netherlands did. They implemented a defensive shape. They really showed a shape. The US really didn't have too much of a shape, and they definitely made us pay in the most basic, simple, strategic sense ever. It was let these guys get their jitters and their energy going and all that, stop the ball, get it back in here, and have our speed and our strategies outdo the US. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the encouraging thing that everybody is saying that I am gonna agree on is that this is a usual result for the U.S., knocked out at round of 16. Where it's unusual is we showed a lot of good posture for a young team. You could see there was bad decision-making or the lack of decision-making, or what they're going to call football intelligence or soccer intelligence. And that's just knowing when to slow a game down, or when to speed it up, or when to feed these balls in, or when to sort of reshape the formation. There was a lack of that because these are kids. We're talking about the majority of them are 22, 23, 24 years old. So they're going to play in multiple World Cups. Tim Ream, I know by next time is going to be 38 or something. So maybe he's not with us, and we'll miss that experience because he's a monster. Like that dude is.
Shout out to the St. Louis then.
Yeah, man, that dude is awesome. But our other St. Louis and Sargent, he's still a kid. He's like, I don't 21 or 22 or something. I think he just graduated in 16 or 18. So he's going to be there, and these kids are going to be there, and boy, do they deserve it, man. It's going to be really exciting. So if we're round of 16ing right now, and we're coming up against these experienced managers, these experienced teams, we're going to be one of those experienced teams and managers next World Cup. And guess where next World Cup is, guys? It's in the freaking North America. It's in US. We have 11 cities that are going to be hosting this next World Cup with a team that's got some real years under their belt working together and gelling. So while I was watching, I was watching a youthful team get beat by better strategies, but the whole time you're thinking, boy, when these dudes really know how to play different teams and adjust to different strategies and implement strategies of their own, we are going to have a legitimately potential giant, a potential giant. And I don't mean to be over encouraging, because we've had some rough years. We didn't even qualify for the last World Cup. It's been nothing but disappointment this last decade or two, with every pundit saying, oh, the U.S. is going to be great someday. This is the first sign where you actually might have some real evidence that the U.S. is going to be great someday. We deserve it, and it's coming. And it may come next World Cup, or at least in the next 2 or 3.
Quick Google, Josh Sargent, 22 years old.
Okay, yeah, I knew he was super young. And the majority
Super
of that
young.
team is super young. Tyler Adams, I mean, all these guys are going to play in multiple World Cups if they stay healthy, if they stay together. This is going to be great. And again, the round of 16 exit, that's exactly what happened in 2014. That's exactly what happened in 2010. And it actually happened in 94, the last time the World Cup was here in the U.S. But this is different because this is the second youngest World Cup team the U.S. has ever fielded. And they're good.
They are good. And when you think back to, I believe it was, 2017 when they didn't qualify, that lost to Trinidad and Tobago, the famous Taylor Twellman, what are we doing?
Yeah.
What are we doing? When you think about the state of American soccer then as to how we're feeling now, yes, I think so many people are disappointed simply because they, at certain times, Moon, didn't look outmatched. Like, I specifically go back to the England game where there were so many chances for the U.S. to get the goals that they needed to really win that game and not just have a draw. And I think that that's a big barometer, when you're going up against the likes of England and you look like the better team, or the team that can certainly take advantage of the matchup, that's a positive sign. That's not where we felt like U.S. soccer was years ago. And I think even though they were the second youngest team at the tournament and they were inexperienced, they needed this seasoning to get them to where they need to go. So I think by the time that we have the next World Cup and we're talking about this group and they've been together this long, they have this experience under their belt, the expectations are going to be much higher. I think when we're talking in 2026, we're going to be saying they better get to the quarterfinals, if not farther.
Yeah, for sure. We have the characters, we have the players that have the skills, and that's, I hate to say this, but that's a first. In the last couple of World Cups, or even just watching friendly matches, I've gone over to the Kansas City stadium a few times watching friendlies, and a lot of times you're like, wow, this is garbage. Like this team, and I'll fully admit, I've said this team is garbage. You got 3 guys out there with like world-class skills, and the rest of them are just good players. We're not talking about world-class players, but we have a potential, I don't know, 9 or 10 world-class players. And when I say world-class, people are like, well, this is World Cup. If they're there, they're world-class players. That's not what I mean by that. What I mean by world-class is they could go anywhere in the world and compete in their leagues. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Of course.
That's a world-class player to me. And right now we've got a couple of them. I think in 4 years we're going to have maybe a full 11, which would make all the difference. And you're right, against England, we showed some tactical intelligence. It was a good way to play. We played them well. We played Wales really well. But the Netherlands, all they had to do is watch some tape and know what to do against our team, and it was hard for them to adjust. So the skills that are there, when they get some football intelligence under their belt and they're really as smart as they are good, I'd say in 5 to 10 years, we have a competing semifinalist, finalist worthy team.
I can't wait for that. It's going to be so fun. Okay, so U.S. out of the World Cup, but there's still some action. We will be talking about that next week as the games continue to unfold. But I know that we want to get back to the basis of what this podcast is, which is to answer your questions, which is to help St. Louis learn about soccer together. And clearly, based on the ratings from the U.S. Netherlands game, there are a lot of people in St. Louis that are already locked into soccer. But for those people who still want to know the basics, the fundamentals of the game, have a lot of questions, we are going to not only answer some today, but you can always reach out to us at asksoccer101@gmail.com, asksoccer101@gmail.com. And I know, Moon, that in an upcoming episode, we are actually going to speak to a referee. So if you have any questions about the rules, logistic questions about the games, please send them in and we will funnel them to our soon to be referee guest, because I think a lot of people are going to learn a lot during that episode.
Yeah, he's a professional referee. He's done all sorts of different leagues, and it's going to be fascinating, really, just sort of peppering him with fan questions and answers from all different experience levels. And when you email us, you can put your question in writing, or you can even send a voice memo. If it's good quality, we'll just throw it on the pod for you.
Yeah, we would love to hear your voice. Let's have a conversation together. Well, speaking of that, Moon, you want to open up the archives and get into some email questions?
Yes, please. They've been piling up. Let's get into one.
I know we've been a little negligent, but there's been a lot going on. We had to talk to Lutz Pfannenstiel about free agency, about the expansion draft for City. We've had the World Cup. There's been a lot happening. So thank you for bearing with us. So this one comes from, I think I'm going to say his name is Diane, Dyan. Is that how you would pronounce that, Moon?
I actually met a Diane that spelled her name like that. So maybe it's Diane.
Maybe it's Diane.
Jan.
Well, next time, send a pronunciation so that we can address you correctly. But thank you for the sweet note. Question number one, Moon. Hello, thank you for this podcast. I'm so excited about the new MLS St. Louis team, but I grew up in a town that didn't have soccer, so this podcast is huge in helping me understand. My question is about the teams and the leagues. Question number one, do the US MLS teams play against the other leagues in the world? And question number two, what are the other leagues and the teams?
There's a couple different ways we can attack this. We can say that the MLS teams and our St. Louis City SC will be playing other teams not in the MLS. Now, in the league, obviously the league is Major League Soccer, and they will be playing only MLS teams for the MLS League and eventually for a shot for the MLS Cup. But you will see, especially during preseason, or at least Europe's preseason, you'll see some of those European squads, the big ones, the Manchester Uniteds, the Chelseas, the Bayern Munichs, the Real Madrids. They will go on these press tours throughout the planet. They like to do it in Australia. They like to do it in Asia. They like to do it in America. They'll come over here and they'll play friendlies. And you'll see that term all throughout soccer, whether it's an international friendly, which would be like a Brazil taking on the U.S., or a league friendly like St. Louis City SC taking on Real Madrid in an off-season sort of time. Those are usually promotional games. It gives us as fans opportunities to see some of our favorite players that are playing in European leagues or wherever come over to the U.S. So you will see friendlies. The MLS in the past has done an MLS All-Star game, and instead of like an East versus West, which has happened and I'm sure will happen as well, a lot of times you will see the MLS All-Stars, which is an all-star group made up of players from the MLS, take on one of those European clubs that comes over. So it's a game that doesn't count for anything, but it's a lot of fun. You see nothing but superstars on the pitch for an all-star game. In Europe, you have what's called the UEFA Champions League. It's an interleague of all the different European leagues. So the top league in Germany, the top league in England, the top league in Italy, the top league here and there will send their best player, their top teams, whether it's the top four in England or the top three wherever, and they will play in an league called the Champions League. We have something very similar here in North America, and up to five MLS teams, 4 from the US and 1 from Canada, play in the CONCACAF Champions League. You'll see that CONCACAF acronym right there, Champions League, CONCACAF Champions League, and therefore they will end up playing teams that are in that league from different regions. You'll see an MLS team, a great MLS team that's at the top of the MLS table, play the best team from Mexico or from other countries and regions within the leagues that make up the CONCACAF League.
And within, you mentioned the Champions League, and I know part of the question was about the different leagues that exist out there. And that would have to be an entire podcast where we list everything out because there's so many different leagues worldwide. But most people you will hear talk about the Premier League, which is out of England. You have La Liga, which is out of Spain, Serie A, which is out of Italy, Bundesliga out of Germany. The list kind of goes on, and there's so many different teams that are involved in those different leagues. CONCACAF stands for the Confederation of North, Central America, and Caribbean Association Football, abbreviated as CONCACAF, and it's one of FIFA's 6 continental governing bodies for association football.
Yes, what she said.
There you go. That's CONCACAF. So do you think that we answered the question thoroughly? again, I'm sorry to not just sit here and name all of the Premier League teams and all of the Serie A teams, but I just think that would kind of defeat the purpose.
Yeah. And you know what? These are all things that you really don't even have to know as you get into it, because you'll find out, just follow your team and you'll find out, hey, they got this match midweek and they're playing so-and-so from Guadalajara. And why? Because it's this type of match, and they'll explain it pretty easily, and you'll catch on to the details. Believe me, baseball and the way some of these other sports work is far more complex than what we got going on here in North America for soccer.
Absolutely. And if you are, since the email was wondering about the other leagues, Moon, you're very into Premier League. And I would suggest that most people in America, when they're into international leagues, Premier League's the one that people are most locked into, correct?
I would say Premier League is probably the biggest overall because of its reach as far as broadcast goes. I think, I'm not sure how the money goes. I know France, because it's like owned by the government or something, has probably more money being splashed around at the top of some of these superstars. But yeah, there's so much money in the English leagues that typically that's where the majority of the greatest players end up going as a whole. So it's a great place to start watching, and it's easy to find on TV. It's a little bit harder to find the German league, which is Bundesliga, or the Spanish league, which is La Liga, or Italian, which is Serie A. But when you hear those, that's what they are. Those are just the leagues within those countries.
And just, to give you a little bit more info, there's 20 teams in the Premier League. So that would be us naming like the 20 Premier League teams, the teams in Serie A, etc. But I would just, and there's a book actually that I read, Moon, stand by, that is about the Premier League and the money that you mentioned that was really, really, really informative. It's called The Club. I recommend a lot of people, if you're wanting to learn about the money and just how the Premier League was built into what it is today, this book called The Club is so informative. It was written by Jonathan Clegg, and it's called The Club, How the Premier League Became the Richest, Most Disruptive Business in Sport. And it talks about the television contracts and how you took what were essentially clubs that were ingrained in smaller English towns and built them into this massive, massive multi-billion-dollar industry. It's very, very, very interesting.
Yeah, it's an insane machine, and I could talk about it forever. And that works a little bit different than our league over here, because they have so many different leagues and they're all associated with one another, where we say there's 20 teams in the Premier League, but that changes every year because the bottom three get relegated to the league below, and the top three from the league below get promoted into the Premier League, which is, extremely lucrative when you go up and extremely bad for money when you go down. So some of these teams, I talked about in an earlier podcast episode, how exciting it is, even if your team, your favorite team, isn't one of the top four dogs, you're watching these things just trying to hang on so you don't get relegated to the league below. It's just as exciting for the bottom of the table as it is for the top of the table.
I understand why American sports owners would not want to participate in relegation, specifically for what you just said, because of the financial risks that exist.
Yeah, they're scared.
They're scared. But I think it would make every sport so much more entertaining. And I don't know why, just for the entertainment and drama factor, they don't adopt it. It makes everything more competitive. Like, can you imagine when St. Louis had the Rams, the 15-65 Rams, that they wouldn't have gotten relegated? They absolutely would have. And that would have forced ownership's hands to do better in the draft and to spend more money in free agency and to just, that whole situation was a mess to begin with. But I just wish that every sports league had the threat of relegation.
Yeah. Can you imagine being penalized for sucking? That's what happens. and as a fan,
you should be penalized. You should.
And as a fan experience, it is phenomenal. It's unbeatable. We're going to preach till we're blue in the face if we talk about it being implemented in American sports, because I don't see it happening ever. But
never. We're too greedy.
But it is fun, and if you like that, go watch some EPL or any of the leagues over in Europe, and maybe the MLS ends up going there. But we'll see. Either way, we're never going to be at the bottom of the table with our team. So whatever, dude.
St. Louis, are you kidding? cranking out all of these stars, homegrown stars, and we're drafting all these people. It's going to be great. And that was like the lamest sell of all time. But I promise you, I promise you, with this team, they're going to do it right. I don't want to put too many expectations on them because they are fresh out the gate, Moon, but just the intentionality and the way that they built every other aspect of this club, I would actually be floored if the team came out and they were bad. I would be very shocked.
Listen, man, I hope so, but I'm not making any predictions because I'm a diehard soccer fan, so I am prepared to criticize. I'm ready to scream.
Moon. I want Angry Moon. You come in here, you're every week, you're positive, you're informative. I want Angry Moon. I want you to come in and just really light up the team or some coaching decisions. I can't wait for that.
Oh yeah. I'm good at making friends. That'll be great. It's sports. I'm supposed to yell. I'm supposed to scream, you know?
Yeah, that's kind of the whole point, right? Fanatics, we love it. And finally, Moon, let's close this out with one more email. This doesn't have a question attached to it, but I think it's definitely worthy of reading. This is from Kevin, who's emailing us from O'Fallon Mo. Shout out to you, Kevin. And Kevin says, "Hi guys, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to give a shout out to Tyler Adams. I am married to a girl from England and her family are huge Leeds United fans. And as a result, so am I. Getting to see him doing great things for the US is really awesome. Additionally, seeing his response to the Iranian reporter was amazing and just shows what kind of guy he is. He seems like someone who will help lead the club into the future. Although it surely means his star is brightening even brighter and ultimately he'll leave Leeds for a club with more money, it is still so cool to see. My in-laws were in town from the UK over the weekend, saw the interview with me, and we could not have been prouder to have him on their club. I thought I was the only Leeds United fan living in the US, but maybe guys like Adams will bring more fans for that club. And at the end of the day, it's just great for the US men's team. Bring on 2026. Loving the podcast from you too. And again, that is from Kevin.
That's awesome. Yeah, he hit it on the nose. First of all, Leeds United has such a beautiful history over there. So if you're looking to get into a club, definitely investigate them in your top 3 or 4 as far as their history and the teams that they fielded in the past. And Tyler Adams, man, did you see that interview?
I did.
So he was criticized in 2 kind of gotcha moments. It was like cringeworthy questions. If anybody hasn't seen this, he was there with the coach Greg Berhalter. And the Iranian interviewer said, hey, first of all, you keep mispronouncing Iran as Iran, and it's super disrespectful, blah, blah, blah. What do you have to say about that? And the other one was something about, you talk about discrimination in Iran and all this other stuff, yet you come from a country that is famously discriminating against black folks and all sorts of different types of people. And what do you say about that, representing a country that's so discriminatory historically and even presently? And man, this guy was an absolute perfect example of good grace, brilliantly handled response. He immediately apologized and said, "I'm so sorry, I've been mispronouncing your country wrong, and I will correct that," which is awesome. It takes a man to apologize and say, "I've done wrong. I will choose to no longer do that." Whereas for some reason, people these days see pushing back as somehow manly. And I thought he did a great thing there. And then he went on to talk about how the U.S. is making strides and changes, and progress is really important to him with discrimination because he's dealt with discrimination all over the place. It was awesome. And I will say this, sadly, it's very, very rare these days that I see somebody, especially a young guy or something like that, that has some fame and popularity, say something that is so well done that it's a good example that I want to show my children. And when I saw that, I thought, man, my sons and my daughters need to see this, because this is exactly how it should be done. He started with the apology. He made a move to improve himself and showed a good example of how to do that. Kudos, Tyler Adams. Great email. I'm glad you caught that. Go Leeds United. I'm so happy you have such a good a representative of not only your club, but your country in one spot. Very, very cool. And
for those who haven't seen the interview or the quote, I actually have a snippet of it here, Moon, that I can read. But I'm with you, just to echo your sentiments before I read it. It's that we're all works in progress. And I always love living by the mantra, once you know better, do better. It's all about respecting people and respecting people's ways of life. And I'm with you. I think it was a great moment in US sports for someone to say, hey, I made a mistake and I apologize, but I'm going to move forward with grace. And I thought it was great. And here's part of the quote from Tyler Adams. There's discrimination everywhere you go. One thing that I've learned, especially from living abroad in the past years and having to fit into different cultures and kind of assimilate into different cultures, is that in the US, we're continuing to make progress every single day. Growing up for me, I grew up in a white family with obviously an African-American heritage and background as well. So I had a little bit of different cultures and was very easily able to assimilate in different cultures. So not everyone has that ease and the ability to do that. And obviously it takes longer to understand. And through education, I think it's super important. Like you just educated me now on the pronunciation of your country. So yeah, it's a process. I think as long as you see progress, that's the most important thing. And I couldn't agree with that more. As long as your intent is not to disrespect and that you absorb what someone is telling you, you correct it, and you just try to be better moving forward. But you're right. A lot of people, especially young men, get defensive or they don't really have the foresight to have such an elegant response.
Yeah, I thought it was beautifully worded. It was calm, it was collected, and it was inspiring. And as we know, we don't see a lot of that. We see a lot of negativity, a lot of yelling, a lot of who can be louder and who can be more outrageous. And I just really appreciate Tyler Adams for setting a good example for my children and for a lot of kids that are looking up to these players. So very, very cool. And thanks for calling that out, Kevin, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Kevin. Thanks for the email. And keep the emails coming one more time. We are going to have a referee on, so send us all your ref questions.
AskSoccer101@gmail.com.
Moon and I will be back in action next week, hopefully with the referee. But until then, Moon, you can send us off.
Go!